Brothers and sisters, I love you so much, and the Lord loves you too, and He loves you so much that He doesn't just want to redeem you and bring you close to Himself. He wants to share with you the joy that He feels of going out and reaching out and grabbing lost sheep and bringing them home. So we're going to talk about how to do that, how to share your faith as a Catholic Christian, how to share the gospel, how to share the best news that mankind has ever or will ever receive with a world that wants it less and less. And before you tune out, if you're not like an uber devout Catholic thinking, well, I guess I'm just getting into this thing and I'm not a professional and I'm not a church worker, so you're talking about how to share my faith, so this episode's not for me. No. This is Christianity 101, guys. Sharing your faith is a part of following Jesus. This is a part of how we're all supposed to live this out. So wherever you're at in your faith walk, this one's for you. Thanks for being with me. So how do we share our faith with a world that seems to want it less and less? A lot of people think that the world we find ourselves in today is very much like the world that the first apostles found themselves in. They were coming to a world that hadn't yet heard about Jesus, and they were bringing something new to this world and trying to convince people to follow Jesus Christ. In some ways, the world today is like that because we're finding ourselves having to convince people to follow Jesus. But in many ways, the world we find ourselves in today is unlike any other time in human history. You see, the apostles found themselves in a world where they had to convince people to shift from one God to the real God, right? To shift from Zeus to Jesus. And I gotta say, that's kind of an easy sale because Zeus was a jerk. He was like me on my worst day, only I could throw lightning bolts at my kids when I come home angry and tired from work. That's Zeus. Convincing people, hey, stop worshiping that guy, start worshiping this God who is love and who loves you so much that He died for you. Kind of an easy sales pitch in many ways. And then as the church expanded, we found ourselves in the most remote regions of the world, and you shift different gods for the true God. People, as maybe they're trying to find divinity in some way, and they're reaching, they're grasping, they're making things up that express our desire for God or what they might have stumbled upon knowing about Him. So there's some truths in their faith, but they had to convince people from, don't worship this idol of a frog in the jungle, worship the true God of love. There's something easy about that pitch. For the first time in history today, we find ourselves having to convince people to worship anything at all. People are becoming not only not religious, but frankly, as they fall away from faith, as much as they are today, people are becoming less human. Not just less spiritual, less human in a very natural sense. The Catechism of the Catholic Church talks about how worship, public worship, coming together for praise and worship, coming together for liturgy, for Mass, doesn't only fulfill divine law, that is the stuff of the Bible. It fulfills natural law. That is the stuff on your heart, written in your very soul. Thomas Aquinas talked about how religiosity, that is giving external expression to faith through religion. Religiosity is a virtue under the subset of justice. And justice is giving to someone what is due to them. And justice is something that, while we refine it, we learn about it, we're all kind of born with a sense of justice, of up and down, of right and wrong, of fair and not fair. Little kids at the age of 2 and 3, you say, that's not fair. You just took my toy. Our religious practice comes from that human, natural, gut sense place within us of fairness. So throughout history, you'll find people who have found themselves experiencing existence. Here I am on this planet. I don't quite know how all this came to be, but I do know that I'm a recipient of my own existence. I'm a recipient of this experience called life. And shouldn't I look for the source of all this and then offer something back? There's a sense of justice and fairness in that offering of something back to the source of all. And you'll find throughout history, people in every culture worshiping in some way. They're worshiping this source of all to the best of their ability as they knew Him. But very similar in different cultures throughout history. And this kind of blows my mind. My travels have brought me all around the world. Dude, you go to to Rome, and you'll find temples, and you'll find altars in those temples. And you go to the other side of the planet, you go to Hawaii, you find Heiaus, that's a temple, and in the center of the temple, an ahu, an altar. Not only have people been worshiping God throughout history, but in the same way, in a religious way that gives external expression where they're offering back to the source of everything because, why? Because that's fair. It's fair. And when people say, can't I be a good person and not be religious? My answer is no. Look, in that part of your personality, you might be good in other ways, but insofar as you've received everything from some source outside of yourself, and it's not even occurring to you to lift your eyes above the presents that you've just unwrapped at the base of the tree and say, where's Santa, right? Or my mom and dad. Where did all this come from? I want to know. I'm grateful to that source. I want to say thanks. Insofar as you've unwrapped the gift of existence and it's not even occurred to you to look beyond yourself to what the source of all this is, and in fairness, in justice, say thank you. I owe it to that source to find out who that is and to return thanks. And maybe obey and conform my life to that source. If that's not occurring to you to do that, then in that aspect, you might be good in other ways, but in that aspect of your personality, you are a profound moral failure. Failure. But a growing number of people, I think because we live in a world that's so dang distracted. It's not because they've thought their way through all this. It's because when the fundamental questions about the meaning of life, what on earth am I here for? What's the source of all this? What happens when I die? When those start to arise in our souls, that makes us uncomfortable, so we just start scrolling on our phones and we stop asking the questions. So for the first time in history, we're losing this sense that's not only spiritual, but profoundly human, that we should worship anything at all. So in that regard, the world we find ourselves in today is very different from the world that the first apostles found themselves in. But you know what else we're losing? We're losing a sense of obligation to our ancestors and to the past. We have this presumption that anything old is stupid and what's modern and cutting edge is smart. Even though we find ourselves becoming less and less happy, maybe they were onto something, right? But we're so quick to throw all this stuff away if it looks like something that grandma did. I recently was blessed to be in Costa Rica. I found myself in a blue zone, one of the few places on earth where people live, an unnatural number of people live to be over 100. And it's cool when you're there, you see the rhythm of life of the people, and they're working, and they're going to Catholic Mass in Costa Rica. But the tourists who go there are looking for the secret sauce. Well, it can't possibly look like what came from my grandma. They're all shopping at the Whole Foods stores in the Nicoya province of Costa Rica and doing yoga on the beach. Guys, I can guarantee you that Juan, after working in his mango fields, is not coming and doing yoga on the beach. But we're just presuming that this stuff, well, we could dismiss that because it's too old-fashioned. There's no way that's got something for me today. And I have no obligation, just because grandma did that, to honor it. Yeah, you do, actually. I've worked with teens who are going through confirmation, and I've been asked the question many times, Chris, should I really get confirmed just for my parents? You know what my answer to that question is? Yes. Unless you want to tell me with all the worldly wisdom you've acquired by the age of 15 that you're about to throw away what was handed on for 1,600 years since St. Patrick landed on the shores of Ireland and converted your ancestors. How about we have this conversation in 10 years? For now, do it to honor the people who have handed on to you and who have risked their lives, who have paid with their blood to give this to you. But we're forgetting all this. The apostles didn't find themselves in a world like that. This is unique. This is new in history. G.K. Chesterton said that men today have lost their way, but this is not surprising, for men have always lost their way. The difference is that now they've lost their address. And not only are people becoming indifferent to religion and to your faith as a Christian, you can sense a growing hostility to Christian faith. And you see this when you look in the Bible. The people who worshiped themselves and made their own rules and made their own reality didn't live and let live. Pharaoh didn't coexist. Pharaoh did not have a bumper sticker on his chariot, coexist with the people of God. He couldn't stand them. See, in his mind, in his worldview, he was the rule maker. He wielded all power and authority in his own life and in his kingdom. So anyone who would bow to a higher source convicted him, pricked his conscience, challenged his own sense of justice. He knew something was wrong. Something was wrong with how he was living, that he wasn't looking to bend the knee to something above himself. He knew that. And the presence of the Jewish people bothered him. Guys, you bother people. It's not just a thing you do on Sunday morning. It's the way that you relate to reality. That you bow to something above yourself, that you worship publicly, that you have a relationship with reality, especially when it comes today, to gender issues, reproduction, when it comes to abortion, to marriage, all that stuff, that you receive that your attitude toward those things isn't hateful and bigoted and curmudgeonly and old-fashioned, but your attitude toward those things is that, I didn't create this reality because I'm not God. There's a difference between you and God, by the way. God never thinks he's you. But that you receive these things from a higher source and conform your life to the will of that higher source written in the Bible, written in human nature. The fact that you're doing that, you notice how no one is okay with just coexisting with you when they disagree with how the church sees those things? They prefer to cancel you. They prefer to cancel you from social media. They prefer to mess with your career. I've met college students who are afraid to tell their professors what they believe. College students who are in sororities, who are cool kids, or fraternities, who are afraid to tell their sorority and fraternity mates that they're Catholics. There's new social norms that say you're bowing to something higher. You don't wield your own reality when it comes to every issue connected with gender or marriage or procreation. That bothers me. It convicts me. So they pull a Pharaoh on us and want to cancel us. And a lot of people who can't stand us want to blame us for their hatred. Isn't that funny? I think of the communists. When the communists would execute someone, they would often send that person's family a bill for the bullet. Ouch. Well, I killed you, and you know what? It's your fault. You were that annoying. You didn't go along with the zeitgeist, the spirit of the age. You came in the way of everybody's happiness and progress. You have to go. It's your fault that you're hated. And, a lot of people would say you Christians just aren't inclusive and welcoming enough. And by that, they mean you speak truths that we don't agree with. Now, guys, there's even people within the church, within the hierarchy, who would tell you that if you're clear in how you articulate the truth, that is inherently unwelcoming. Guys, that's not the welcome that Jesus calls us to. The welcome of the gospel is an invitation to the entire world, an acceptance of where people are at, an accompaniment of them, in the words of Pope Francis, a love of people, but that love also demands that we speak truth. So it's this constant balance between this truth and this acceptance and love, which puts us in a very uncomfortable situation, doesn't it? Thank you, Jesus. But the world would tell us, we hate you because you're just not welcoming enough. And yeah, everyone can work on how welcoming and loving we are. That's true. But I got to say this. I got to call this out right now. Sometimes people blame you for their hatred of you and reject you, not because you're not welcoming enough, but because, frankly, they hate the truth. John 3:16, we all know that verse. God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever should believe in him would not perish but have eternal life. A lot of people don't know the verses right after that, where Jesus says that those who don't accept the Son will find themselves condemned. Now, he wasn't saying those who seek God to the best of their ability as they know him, but just don't happen to know that Jesus, or be convinced that Jesus is the Lord. He could still save, he would still be their only salvation. He's the only salvation. But he could still find ways to save people outside of the norms that he set up. However, some people reject the light because they love their sin. And he talks about these people right after John 3:16 and John 19. This is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but people loved darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil. Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. But whoever lives by the truth comes into the light. Some people just hate you. And guess what, guys? That's not all your fault. They might hate you just because they hate God, because they don't want to live a certain way, because you remind them that they should bow to something bigger than themselves. And this often expresses itself today through a modern deconstructionist movement that would label everything that has to do with Western civilization, all the beauty of Western civilization, all the goodness in it, and your Catholic faith as nothing but evil, harmful, a colonialist, harmful presence throughout history that we just have to get rid of it. And I got to tell you, I hear this story, this narrative more and more frequently of parents who send their kids off to college, their kid comes back hating Catholicism. Not live and let live, but seeing the faith they were raised with as nothing but harmful. They overlook the fact that we started the hospital system, the university system, that the largest social service provider on earth. Let's overlook all that. They reduce it to nothing but the most harmful elements of the church's history and of Western civilization. Some people call that movement woke. I like calling it something clearer and cleaner, I think, because some people think, well, woke doesn't have to do with like good issues and justice. All right, I don't want to confuse here. Let's call it nothing-but-ism. Nothing-but-ism. In the nothing-but-ist worldview, everything, the arc of human history, our purpose, the struggle of existence, the church's history, all of it can be reduced to nothing but a relationship between the oppressed and the oppressor. That's it. There's the narrow lens for how they see everything. And if they're spiritually awake, then they'll see it literally everywhere. And if you're spiritually asleep, then you don't see it. You just don't get it because you're not woked up. Look, don't get me wrong, guys. The battle for justice is real. Oppressed and oppressor is a real part of history. Injustice is real. Racism is real. Systemic injustice and systemic racism, those things are all real. But the evils of colonialism and the trauma it did to the world is real. However, a nothing but worldview, when it comes to those things, is so off that it's delusional. And the conclusion people run into when they see nothing but that is a total antagonism toward all faith, because they see it as nothing but harmful. Nothing-but-ism would tell us that American history is not a history with racism or racism currently in it, but that America is nothing but a racist system, that the family is nothing but a system to oppress LGBT people, that men, or people who identify as that men are nothing but a sex that oppresses women. There was a Tolkien Society seminar that papers to be presented include Gondor in Transition, a brief introduction to the transgender realities in The Lord of the Rings. Pardoning Saruman, the queer in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Or The Invisible Other, Tolkien's dwarf women and the feminine lack. There's like a religious dogmatic fervor that people bring to how they perceive reality. There was a piece written in a London paper recently entitled, "Roads Designed by Men Are Killing Women." Okay? How does this impact faith and your ability to see it? When people are poisoned, not only by indifference, but let's bring it deeper, by an antagonism toward Christian faith, because they reduce it to nothing but the Catholic history, nothing but a patriarchal, colonialist power that hates gays. That's literally how many college students would sum up the entirety of Christian faith. Which is why people, during protests recently, were tearing down statues of Saint Junipero Serra. Saint Junipero Serra, who the Native Americans were weeping when he died, who walked from California to Mexico City to fight for their rights when the colonialist powers were oppressing them and taking advantage of them. But let's disregard all that. He's nothing but a colonialist. That's it. Man, when people see the church that way, despite all the good, and they can only see that one element, the door is shut to the conversation even beginning. I'm friends with Father Mike Schmitz, who, if it weren't for that guy, I would be the world's most handsome Catholic evangelist. Schmitz. Anyway, sorry. I think someone just fell out of their chair in the sound booth. He's been in college ministry for 17 years. God bless the guy. I mean, and a lot of people know him as a world-class podcaster. But before that, and during that, and still today, the way he sees himself is he's a campus ministry priest, trying to convert college students. God bless him. And I asked him, how have things changed over the course of 17 years with these movements in society and how people are branding Catholicism? And he said, when I started this, I could approach someone who wasn't that into the faith and we could start a conversation. He's like, today? They won't even let you begin the conversation because they've reduced Catholic history to nothing but that worst element. So they could see him coming handsome priest with beautiful things to say. And it might as well be a guy in a Nazi outfit coming to them saying, hey, I have a coherent case to make to you for why you should listen to my worldview. Dude, if you're wearing a Nazi outfit, if you're part of a bigoted hate group, I don't care if you claim to have a coherent case to make to me about your relationship to Jewish people. I don't want to talk to you. I won't even begin the conversation. This is literally how people are coming to see Catholicism. Pope Benedict XVI, he said 100 years ago, everyone would have thought it absurd to speak of homosexual marriage. Today, by the way, 100 years ago, in 2008, Obama said that he opposed same-sex marriage. This is 2008. Okay, in 2015, no one was even thinking about the transgender movement becoming mainstream as something that, if you don't agree with it, we're going to blame you for killing people who are gender dysphoric by their own suicide, and start tolerating, as Teen Vogue said, we have to stop policing trans rage. What? Wow, this is happening quickly. As if our only motive is hate. I know plenty of Christians who love. In fact, I've met very few who would carry those signs. God hates gays. No, God hates your sign. I've been a Catholic I'm 47. I have not met these people that everyone accuses of being mean and bigoted and hateful. These were mainstream views throughout history, and love motivated parents and pastors to say, hey kids, there's guidelines that you should conform to because it's good for you. Overnight, this has changed. Today, whoever opposes these views, especially around these issues, is socially excommunicated. The same applies to abortion, the production of human beings in the laboratory. Modern society is in the process of forming an anti-Christian creed, and resisting it is punishable by social excommunication. The fear of this spiritual power of the Antichrist is too natural. It takes the prayers of a whole diocese and universal church to resist it. Okay, what do we do? What do we do? Chris, you've just spent 20 minutes telling me about the water that I'm drowning in. All right. That's only helpful for 20 minutes. Anything beyond that, we start getting really depressing. What do we do? A couple options from here, all right? Number one, the get really angry option. I figured I would just call it out because a lot of us default to that, and I get it. I get it. Anger is an emotion given to you by God to set something right when it's wrong. But when your anger doesn't help set something right, it becomes a destructive fire. And I've seen so many Christians just straight up become angry and obsess about it and get lost in the constant news cycle going on in the world. Guys, the early Christians knew what was going on in their world. They knew about Nero. They knew about the fact that he took Christians and impaled them and covered them in tar and lit them on fire to warm his palace. They knew all the problems in Rome. They knew about the orgies. They knew about all the moral decay. And they didn't get together at church and complain about President Nero all the time. They had something bigger to think about and better. They knew that 2,000 years from now, Chris Stefanick is going to be on Formed talking about Jesus. I don't even know what Formed is, but I just sense that's going to happen. And they were right. Nero's gone. Rome is gone. Here we are. The get really angry option, really, it portrays a lack of faith. Be aware of what's going on in the world, but saints aren't saints because they filled their hearts with what they hate, but with what they love. Be aware of what's going on in the world, then move on. Option two, the blend in option. Every mainstream Protestant church that has tried the blend-in option, you know what's happened? All their members have left. They've collapsed. I mean, there's Catholics in every level within the church hierarchy right now who are thinking, maybe we should just blend in. I mean, come down from that cross and we'll believe in you. You don't have to have those teachings that divide us from you. That whole thing about like your divinity, you don't, come on. Can't we just get along? Catholics, come on down. Come down from that cross. Then maybe we could believe with you. The thing is, they won't actually believe with you because there will be nothing that you believe that's different. Doesn't work. How about this? The Benedict option. There's actually a book written about this, and it makes a lot of sense. As Western civilization was crumbling in the 6th century, St. Benedict didn't shun the world, but he went off and said, I'm going to live a monastic experience. He's the founder of Western monasticism. And he spent his time in prayer, not rejecting the world. People would be welcomed in if they came to the monasteries. But they said, we're just going to do our thing. And they preserved the classics, which is why if you read anything from the Greeks and the Romans, it's because as barbarian hordes destroyed what had been the Roman Empire, they were hiding those things in monasteries and transcribing them. You're welcome, secular universities. And as the floodwaters of all the barbarian hordes receded, here we had these lights of faith, these islands, not only of Christianity, but of Western civilization, kept alive. There's a lot of merit to that, but I want to propose a different option. The apostolic option. Let's engage the world with the insane joy that the apostles had, even if it might cost you your head. Bringing the best news ever to a world that wants to reject us, and even when they're rejecting us, continuing to bring the best news ever by how we live and how we talk, and by choosing to share it, as if we have the best news mankind's ever received, because guess what? We do. I think of the apostles hiding in the upper room for fear of the people who just killed Jesus, and Jesus appeared to them. Our resurrected Lord appeared to them, and he did not say, go ahead, preach the gospel, it's going to work out okay. I could almost hear them say, Lord, what if they kill us? And him saying, if they kill you? Oh, they're totally going to kill you. The very thing that they feared actually happened. He did better than give them false promises. He breathed on them. Receive the Holy Spirit, whose sins you forgive are forgiven them. He sent them out with such a joy in this good news of the gospel that was bigger than all the trials they'd face in the world, that this is the only faith that at its founding, the world's first response was, are they drunk? Dude, it's 9 a.m. They drinking Bloody Marys already? Who's even serving that at 9 a.m. in Jerusalem? The apostolic option. Man. Lord, help us to have that joy of the first apostles in the face of a world that can't stand us. In the next episode, this is when we just spelled out what's going wrong, a couple of the options. In the next episode, I want to talk about how to live out that apostolic option in simple, tangible ways in your life every day. We'll see you then. Man, wasn't that great? Listen, if you don't want to be happy, be sure not to subscribe. But if you want a more joyful life, the kind of life that God created you for, the kind of life Jesus promised when he said, I came to give you life to the full, then make sure you hit subscribe and share this channel with everybody you know.